The Ashcroft family's monthly dinners were less about enjoying food and more about flaunting wealth. This evening, held in the sprawling estate just outside Portland, Oregon, promised to be particularly unbearable. I settled into my usual spot near the fireplace, quietly watching as my cousins competed to see who could boast the loudest. Just bought a ranch in Montana, Preston bragged, swirling his glass of wine, right next to the CEO who owns half of Silicon Valley. Please, Cassandra scoffed, flicking open her designer clutch with flair. We just closed on a vineyard in Napa Valley. Private access to the valley itself. You can't put a price on views like that. I hid a smile behind my iced tea. If only they knew. You've been awfully quiet, Nora. Aunt Evelyn's sharp voice cut through the chatter. Preston leaned forward, his fake sympathy dripping. We were just wondering about your living situation. There it was. What about it? I asked, setting down my glass. That cramped duplex in Portland, right? Preston smirked. Still renting, Cassandra added, feigning surprise. Didn't know people our age still rented. I almost laughed. That duplex was my company's first commercial acquisition under Westpine Holdings. To them, I was just a struggling tenant, but in reality, I was the owner. I liked the space, I said evenly. You're 35, sweetie, Evelyn said with a patronizing smile. It's time to grow up, buy something real. Real, I replied. Try a $1.8 billion portfolio of multifamily buildings, commercial towers, and yes, the Ashcroft Plaza, the very property you all gathered in 6 months ago. I had quietly acquired it through a private equity arm they would never trace back to me. I've managed just fine, I said calmly. Preston smirked. You can't even afford a mortgage. I leaned back and let them talk. Soon the lease renewal letters would arrive on their desks, and guess whose name would be on the letterhead? My family had no idea who I really was or what I was capable of. They dismissed me as the underachiever who rented a modest apartment, oblivious to the fact that I was the secret force behind Westpine Holdings, the company that had been quietly acquiring commercial and residential properties across the Pacific Northwest for the past decade. Have you heard about that situation on Alder Street? Cassandra interjected, her eyes sparkling with mock pity. Some firm bought the entire block. They're going to tear it down. Guess that little apartment of yours will finally be gone. I kept my expression neutral. I was the buyer, and I had no plans to demolish anything. The Alder Street complex was a hidden treasure, its brick facades, vintage detailing, and rent protections for families who had lived there for decades made it a gem. I was deeply involved in a historically respectful renovation. Really, I asked, hadn't heard. Well, of course not, Preston sneered. Deals that big are way out of your league. If you get evicted, Evelyn added brightly, you can always move back into the guest house. We'll help you find something more respectable. Maybe even someone respectable. I'm happy, I said flatly, and so is my landlord. Cassandra laughed tightly. You can't live a small life forever, dear. The Hale name used to mean something in this state. It still did, just not in the way they thought. In real estate circles, Westpine was synonymous with ethical growth and tenant-first investing, the exact opposite of my cousin's flashy developments that bulldozed communities for clout. Actually, Dad interrupted, setting down his wine glass, this meeting's partly about business. The board's worried about the new owner of Ashcroft Plaza, he continued. Westpine Holdings bought a majority stake 6 months ago. No one knows who they are. Possibly some foreign investor. Preston nodded knowingly. Has to be. These tycoons love legacy properties. If only they knew that the mysterious investor they feared was sitting right here in a thrifted cardigan and worn boots. Dad went on. They're asking tough questions, especially about our accounting creative. Accounting, like when Preston borrowed from the building fund to finance his Montana retreat, or Cassandra charging her luxury handbags as client engagement expenses. Aunt Evelyn's pearls twitched with unease. I'm sure it's nothing serious. The Hale name still means something. That's just it. Dad cut in again. This Westpine person doesn't seem impressed by our names. They've ordered a full audit. I watched the flicker of panic ripple across their faces hidden behind designer smiles. An audit would reveal more than just questionable expenses. It would crack their whole operation wide open. Maybe Nora could help, Cassandra suggested sweetly, her tone dripping with false innocence. She works in real estate, doesn't she? Maybe she knows someone at the management company. All eyes turned to me. Just like that, I was no longer the family embarrassment. I was potentially useful. I mostly work with smaller residential clients, I said smoothly. Nothing on the scale of Ashcroft Plaza. For God's sake, Preston snapped, you can't even help your own family. Mom shot him a warning glance, but her silence said it all. Even Dad was back to scrolling through his phone, uninterested in defending me. They had no idea how helpful I was about to be, just not in the way they hoped. The next morning, I stood in my real office, an entire penthouse floor overlooking downtown Portland. I prepared for a moment I had planned for over a year. My assistant, Isla, entered briskly, setting a cappuccino beside my laptop. The Ashcroft Plaza board is already seated, she said. Your family arrived early, trying to charm the independent members. I smirked, imagining Preston and Cassandra working the room in desperation. Audit packets are printed and distributed. The forensic team uncovered more than expected. She paused. Are you sure you want to do this once they know there's no turning back? They need to learn, I said quietly, that legacy isn't a license to abuse power. I turned to the glass wall, catching my reflection. Gone were my jeans and cardigan. Today, I wore a tailored navy Altusara suit, sharp lines, quiet strength. The kind of look Aunt Evelyn always dreamed I'd wear to meet a husband. Ownership announcement goes live in 20 minutes, Isla said. Once it hits, you'll be unmasked. Then let's begin, I said, picking up my briefcase. The Ashcroft Plaza boardroom hushed as I entered. My family clustered at the far end, looking rattled and out of place. Who are you? Preston barked. This is a private meeting. I calmly placed my briefcase at the head of the table. I'm Nora Hale, I said, founder and sole owner of Westpine Holdings, the company that owns this building, and several others your family exploited illegally. Evelyn's face turned ghostly white. Cassandra's lips parted, but no sound came. My father's hands tightened around his pen. Nora, he breathed. I nodded. Good morning. I opened the briefcase and began sliding audit reports across the table. Shall we review your financials? This is insane, Preston stammered. You're just what the black sheep, the renter, the woman in thrifted clothes. Cassandra blinked. But you show apartments. I work, I said simply. And I built something real with integrity, not illusion. The board watched stunned as the proud Ashcroft family unraveled page by page. These folders, I said, sliding them across the table, contain detailed documentation of every misused fund, every inflated invoice, every falsified receipt. Reports of financial irregularities involving Ashcroft Plaza's accounts. I handed out the final set of documents. Preston, would you care to explain the $2 million in roof repairs that financed your Montana property? His face flushed red so fast I thought he might faint. Or Cassandra. I continued flipping to the next page. Would you like to walk us through your husband's invoices, charging triple market rates for basic plumbing? Aunt Evelyn gasped. No, I said evenly. You aired it out. I'm just making sure it gets cleaned. Dad finally spoke, voice low and pleading, Nora, sweetheart, we can explain. Don't, I said, raising my hand. I've watched this family treat our great-grandfather's legacy like a personal ATM. While you mocked my so-called humble life, I was building something better based on values, not vanity. Why? Cassandra asked, dazed. Why pretend to struggle? I didn't pretend, I replied. I lived modestly. I invested wisely. You thought wealth had to be loud. Preston muttered in disbelief. You really live in that Alder Street building. I own it, I corrected, and most of the block. No, I'm not tearing it down because some of us care about people, not just profits. Suddenly, phones buzzed around the table. One board member looked up, reading from his screen. Westpine Holdings reveals CEO's identity. Nora Hale confirmed as owner of $2 billion real estate portfolio. Cassandra whispered, pale, this will ruin us. No, I said firmly, this will save you from yourselves. Effective immediately, Ashcroft Plaza would operate transparently. No more shell games, no more sweetheart contracts. The fallout was swift and unmistakable. Aunt Evelyn resigned from 3 local boards, too ashamed to face the community. Cassandra's husband's firm folded within weeks after the audit's findings came to light. But not all was bitter. Cassandra herself was arrested, but later enrolled in a public university's real estate program. She began volunteering at a transitional housing shelter downtown and told me it gave her more purpose than any gallery opening ever had. Dad surprisingly asked to learn the business not to reclaim control but as a student. He wanted to understand what I had built. 6 months later, I was back in my Alder Street apartment. Yes, I had kept it. Reviewing quarterly reports, I saw Ashcroft Plaza thriving. Leases were stable, tenant satisfaction had improved, and small retailers on the ground floor were turning healthy profits. One afternoon, a knock broke my focus. I opened the door to find my mother wearing jeans, no makeup. It took me a moment to process her casual appearance. I got your invitation, she said, holding up a card. A courtyard holiday party. I nodded. It's not quite your scene. No, she admitted, glancing around my modest space. But I'm learning that maybe scene isn't everything. She picked up a photo of me at 23 beaming at my real estate license ceremony. I never asked, she said softly, why this path? Because I wanted to build something real, I replied, not just buy and flaunt it. And now she murmured, you control more than all of us. I do, I nodded. But control isn't the goal, purpose is. She looked at me seriously. Will you teach me? Come tonight, I said. Meet the families who've lived here for decades. Listen, that's where legacy begins. Later, I stood by my window watching the lights twinkle across Portland. This city I'd quietly made mine. Ashcroft Plaza glowed in the distance, no longer a monument to greed but a symbol of restoration. Below, the Alder Street building buzzed with quiet life. Brickwork, original wood beams, and garden courtyards preserved with care. My phone pinged with new messages, partnership offers, speaking invitations, acquisition deals. Westpine Holdings was in high demand, but I kept my schedule humane, my routine grounded. Success wasn't about outshining my past. It was about building something that mattered, something that would last. Sometimes the person they pity becomes the one they must learn from. And sometimes the greatest triumph doesn't roar. It endures. A week later at the Alder Street holiday party, I stood by the garden fountain watching my family slowly adjust to a world they once dismissed. My mother sat beside Mrs. Lopez, a tenant who had lived here for 38 years, listening with genuine interest. Preston helped string lights with Mr. Keller, a World War II veteran, and the building's longest-term resident. Cassandra laughed with a group of children icing sugar cookies. They were learning. Real wealth wasn't about flaunting possessions. It was about preserving, sharing, and uplifting communities. Dad joined me near the cocoa table. You know, he said quietly, your great-grandfather believed buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets. I nodded. I had found his old ledgers, handwritten notes about protecting tenants. We forgot that. He looked at me not as a daughter who had lost her way, but as someone carrying the torch he had dropped. You could have ruined us. Never was the point, I said, watching a little girl twirl under the fairy lights. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. Sometimes the greatest success isn't proving them wrong. It's offering a better way forward. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly counted out, maybe you see a bit of yourself in me. I didn't set out to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to build something real, something rooted in values, not vanity. If my story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What have you built quietly while others doubted you? Let's give credit to the silent work, the long nights, and the hard choices. And if you're at a point where the world expects nothing from you, don't shout louder. Build stronger. You don't need permission to start. You need purpose and persistence. The rest will follow. Support this journey by subscribing. There are more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms. Because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be.